Hello, everybody. This is so strange. I've done this talk a couple of times before, but I've never done it virtually. And as we were talking about sort of in the green room, which is now apparently red, um, the it's hard to not be able to be hanging out with you, to be flying out to the location and kind of hanging out and kind of like seeing what this place is about, and also when the talk starts, being able to kind of feel the pomp and circumstance of all of the energy in the room. So, and it's hard. So we're going to be doing Q&A after this. This talk is normally kind of a little more interactive, but we're going to kind of go YOLO because that's kind of what life is like right now. So I'm going to start sharing my screen here because I've been stuck in this red box for a long time. And here we go. Okay. There we go. Everyone can see an orange box. Hopefully, this is one of my most well-designed. So I've got to be able to say that because it's kind of the point. As we already talked about, I've been doing engineering leadership for quite some time. And I just realized this is normally when I ask these questions of the audience where I say, I'm going to ask them anyway, even though I can't see you. I say welcome, and everyone's like, whoo, it started, yay, and who's this guy all about? And then I say something along the lines of, okay, everybody, you got to do this in the comfort of your own home now. I say, everybody who is a manager, raise their hand. And then I say program managers, and then I say quality or designers or da-da-da. And then I throw in some zingers like, any lawyers here? And then I say, any HR folks here? And I tell a joke there as well. And then I ask the thing that's really interesting to me, which is I say, everybody who is an extrovert, go ahead and raise your hand. And this is strange. And I've done this worldwide, and this ratios are always kind of in the same round. About 20 to 30% of the audience raises their hands. And I say, as extroverts, leave your hands up. I know it's going to be easy for you. And I say, introverts, raise your hands. And every time, worldwide, regardless of the size of the group of people, majority of the room is introverts, 51% or higher, which is really always interesting to me. And it's an interesting sort of break the ice activity to realize that the majority of the conferences I'm speaking at, which is usually something around leadership, the majority of the folks are introverts. Isn't that interesting? We should talk about that in the Q&A. I am an introvert, which means it's kind of okay that I'm sitting here in my little red room right now with Kyle the octopus over my shoulder here. But I really deeply enjoy the energy of hanging out with people and growing people and doing those things, even though people are generally scary to me. And I've seen a lot of people, and they've all not been mostly not scary. I was at Borland a million years ago. I usually ask the audience, who's heard of Borland? And it's like 2 people because it's a million years ago. And then I worked at Netscape, first browser. Some of you probably know that one as well. Then I worked at that startup that you've never heard of, that one. That was me. I started at Apple just after the first .com bubble. I was a part of the macOS team, and then I ran this online store. I was there for almost 8.5 years before I went to Palantir for 3.5 years, where I did some really interesting work on actually the first of 3 rapidly growing companies. And this is the trial of the last decade for me, was for both Palantir, for Pinterest, and also for Slack, showing up basically as like employee number 101 and growing it to about 1,000. So that was Palantir, Pinterest, and Slack. At Pinterest, I was the VP of engineering for almost 2 years. And then finally at Slack, I was there until late last year. I was the VP of engineering. There's a missing second Apple on here. I started Apple earlier this year. I had about 10 weeks in the office, in the mothership. And then the rest of the weeks I've been sitting here as we sit right now in the red room. Okay. Boop. Oh, and there's the right logo for Slack. So pretty. I kind of debated about which talk to share with y'all. This one, at this point, I've probably gotten you to laugh at some point in a regular scenario. Now we're all sitting in our respective rooms, drinking our coffee, which is delicious, by the way. This is a good perk, being able to do this. But the reason I debated myself about this talk is this is not like a pick-me-up talk. This is about some of the hardest parts of leadership. And this is why I say you're not going to laugh a lot more. And I think it's a good talk to do right now. I think there's some reflection about how leaders begin their journey and the lessons that they learn. And so even though it's not necessarily a pick me up, it finishes strong. And in the Q&A, I'll bring you out of the depression that we're about to go through. Not depression, that's too strong. But this is a hard talk. And it starts with a mindset shift. Here we are, Wednesday morning. It's Wednesday, right? We don't know what day it is anymore. Wednesday morning. I want you to go back, and whether you are currently a leader, and I'm guessing you are, given you're at this conference, or whether you're just an aspirational leader, I want you to think about that moment when the he or she in your life said, in your professional life said, hey, person, you're going to be a leader now. You're going to be a manager right there. You're starting as a brand new leader. And whether you did that, you just recently did that, or whether you did that 10 years ago, again, blank slate. That's where we're starting. I can tell you what it was for me, by the way. I was at Netscape when I first became an engineering manager. Tony walked into my taupe office and he said, hey, Michael, this engineering team we have here, there's 3 folks here. I need someone to be a manager. I think you'd probably be good at this. Would you like to do it? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. He's like, great. Well, I'll talk with Harrison and Dave and Sue and tell them we're going to do this. And I'm like, awesome. It's called a battlefield promotion. It felt great, by the way. It felt like this vote of confidence and sort of a progression in my career. And I was like joyful, but, went and did it for a little bit, realized the team was, didn't know what I was doing. And went to my manager and I said, hey, we're really busy. I think we need more people because we're rapidly growing and it's Netscape and we're building the internet. I said to my boss, Tony, I said, hey, can I get like a rec or I need to grow. What do I need to do? I've heard about recs. He's like, yeah, just open a rec, go talk to HR. And I'm like, cool. What's a rec? And who's HR? There was 0 training, battlefield promotion. So that's where I started. And that's the bad news about sort of and this is where it starts getting a little depressing. I'm going to explain how your good intentions as a human being, prior training, are going to erode your credibility, stunt the growth of your team, reinforce the theory that most managers are power-hungry jerks working with all the authority and making judgment calls with woefully incomplete data. Yeah, right? Are we pumped for this talk now? Good. This is a cautionary tale full of very hard-earned advice. I have constructed a scenario with every bad decision I've ever made, all into one. You're not going to do it like this, but this one starts here and just goes straight down. So, and it's a real pick-me-up talk called The New Manager Death Spiral, right? Yeah, I know you're pumped to hear this one. It's so weird not being able to hear people. Okay, this is a disclaimer for all y'all. This is a worst case scenario. This is a synthesized version of many different stories. It combines not every single leadership, but it combines just this horrific parade of poor leadership choices spun into a beautiful, cascading, horrific mess. It's unlikely that you're going to perform this completely in this fashion, but I guaranteed you'll perform parts of it, and chances are you already have. And it starts with Tony leaving my office with me going, cool, I'm a manager now. It starts with a single self-affirmation, which is you tell yourself quietly, you say, I can do it. I'm the boss. All rolls up to me. I'm the person responsible. I got to look like I know what I'm doing. I'm the boss. And you do what you did when you were for an engineer or whatever your role is. You do what you did when you first showed up at a new gig, and you sign up for all the things. I am going to make a good first impression. You want to prove yourself, so you sign up for all of the things. Work late, you do your very best to kick ass and to make a very good first impression. This is the approach that worked for you in the past as an individual. So of course, it's going to work for you as you lead a team, all the things. And this is where the spiral begins, because the initial thought is actually incorrect. It says, I can do it all myself because I'm the boss. You have entered our first failure mode. I like having coffee. This is great. The thing is, especially for engineers, you're used to having complete and total visibility into your work, because that's how it worked as an individual contributor in your former career. You had complete, I know what I'm doing, I can see what I'm doing, I have visibility in it. You're instinctually reluctant to delegate your work because it's an unfamiliar loss of power to you. Compounding your poor judgment is your belief that you are the best person to do this thing because you did it already as an individual, whatever the work is. The problem is that in your enthusiastic effort to prove yourself, you sign up for way too many things, more than you could possibly do yourself. You have a lot more access to things too, because you're a manager. But also there's something very different about this work. This is the work of a team versus the work of an individual who's building a feature. So this leads to your first failure mode, which is inevitably the quality of your work drops because you lack the time to complete it. Missed deadlines, dropped commitments, half completed work passed off as the final product, or just a couple of the awkward situations you find yourself in. And you need to remember that as a manager, your job is not to get things done. It's to get things done at scale. You were doing, 10 things as an individual. Now you're responsible for 100, and they're interconnected. Now, if you were an individual and you felt a little overloaded, you would do what any normal human being does, which is you ask for help. Hey, boss, I have too many things on my plate. But as this is a constructed story, and as this is a worst case scenario, that is not what you do. You batten down the hatches, you update your affirmation, and you say, I can do it all myself. Quietly to yourself, I can do it all myself. I'm in control because I'm the boss. The death spiral starts to pick up a little speed at this point, because you can see in their eyes, and it's harder at a video conference, you can see the glimmer of your failure in their eyes. I can do it all myself. You ignore it. I can do it all myself. I'm in control. I'm the boss. Again, last time I'll say this. This is a constructed scenario. These are real things, but this is all together. Hopefully no one else realizes. With your first sort of admission to yourself of the reality of the situation, you begin to fake delegate the smaller or less important tasks. Fake delegation is one of my least favorite things on the planet. It's the act of giving them all of the work, but neither full control nor context. They don't need it, right? You're the boss. You'll tell them when they need to know. Just like you, they start to fail either because they don't feel they have the authority to change the scenario, or they lack context, or what's going on, or maybe they had the project pointed in the wrong direction right out of the gate. So they're doing something just bizarre. So they do, because they're not on the death spiral, they do the right thing. They bring this to your attention. They say, hey, boss, manager, leader. They tell you, hey, we're headed in the right direction here. It's like, it's not clear what we're supposed to be doing here, and who needs this, and what does winning look like, and what are the OKRs around this. And this is where this spiral gets particularly painful. Every wrong decision stitched together. They tell you something along the lines of, we didn't understand this portion of the project was more important, so we started over here, which seemed reasonable at the time, but is clearly in hindsight the wrong place to start. They ask for help. That's great. It's a sign of trust, by the way. Now, you think you're internally frustrated. You think, but you do not say, it's obviously the wrong place to start. If I were running this project, we wouldn't be in this situation. You're right, but you're incredibly wrong, because you're right that if your hands were running this project that you were familiar with or had done before, your prior experience probably would have improved in expectation. You're wrong because a strategy of not building trust on a team through successful, healthy delegation is one of the greatest accelerants to the new manager death spiral. You can't appear weak. You can't appear to not know how to do your job, which is a job you've never done before. Remember the line, I can do it all myself. I'm in control. I am the boss. Changing of strategy right now is an admission of failure. Failure is weakness, and you are the boss. You give the barest of corrective advice, and you tell them, go figure it out, or else. Of course, you would never, ever say this. But the thing about this line that bugs me, is there's a lot of ways to say this line without even saying it. I know how to say this line without saying anything at all. And poor managers think this is management or it's leadership a threat. Your team leaves this interaction with the following impression: they are failing, you're mad, inflexible, or unwilling to listen to their opinions. And this is when the point of the spiral, when they stop talking to you and they start talking to each other. There is only one slide in this entire deck that matters, and I'm going to show it to you now. It's the only slide. We could have done this in a minute. Your job as a manager, as a leader, is to aggressively delegate. There is work out there that you have to do that you're guaranteed you're going to get an A on, and it's because you've done it before. You've done it many times. It's just old. It's a habit to you to get it done. This, for this team that you're giving this work to, chances are it's not going to be an A. Chances are it could be a B. And I'm here to tell you right now, a B. They don't meet all the goals. They got a B, whatever that means. A B is killing it on a first try. A B is amazing, and it has nothing to do with the quality of the work. It has to do with the fact that they get to learn to do that new thing they've never done before. You, the leader, get to coach them towards an A. You get to help them say, listen, this is how I would do this. What do you think? And perhaps most importantly, truly delegating, you're demonstrating trust by giving them the work that you and they know is beyond their means. We're going to figure this out together. Sounds great, right? But you don't do it because you're on the new manager death spiral. So it gets real bad now. Since you aren't listening, the team starts talking to each other and to other teams. They're trying to self-correct probably, and perhaps they might, but this is the death spiral, so they don't. They fail, which is unfortunate because the data all existed to be successful, and they just needed you to be a leader and to nudge them in the right direction at the right time. But since it was clear you didn't want to hear it, they didn't share it, and the project failed. Whatever the project, it failed. Getting super bad now. Everyone is demoralized. Everyone, including yourself, feel like they failed. But since no one is truly communicating, all sorts of opinions starts to become facts. You tell yourself the story. You might not have the right people on the team, and perhaps shuffling people around will be a better outcome, because when has a reorg not fixed everything? They think they failed because you didn't get them the context because you were busy withholding information, being proud and not listening. This is, having been in this scenario before, this is when all sorts of really bad political situations start. So congratulations, everybody. Through a deft combination of poor communication, crap judgment, and a systematic demoralization of your team, you and your team have also failed at the task at hand. You've pretty much irreparably harmed your relationship with your team and your credibility. And then a trusted, and this is when you know you're at the bottom, and then a trusted someone tells you what everyone has been saying about you in the hallway, or whatever the new version of the hallway is now. And it's bad. It's toxic. And you hear this thing from this trusted someone, and it's just this horrible punch to the gut. You quietly tell yourself, this is not me. And you're right. It's not at all who you are. Who you are in this hypothetical constructed moment is precisely the opposite of a leader. So I usually let the room kind of be quiet for a second because everyone's like, whoa. And then I put up these are teacup pigs. I'm doing a teacup pig timeout. Everyone take a deep breath, relax. This is a teacup pig chaser. All right, we're at the bottom. Now we're going to go climb back up now. Doesn't that make me happy? Whenever I look at that, it makes me happy. This is the second important slide. Management is not a promotion. It feels like it. It feels like you've been promoted, and perhaps there is more money or some other compensation there. But it's not a promotion. It's a brand new job. You're promoted when you're successful in your current job, and it's equal parts recognition and reward. In many companies, the expectation is that you're like performing at a higher level before you get promoted. But remember, management is a different job. You're starting somewhere completely different. Management is a career restart as well. Yes, the words that you use and the people around you look familiar, and the job, the work is familiar, but your relation to it is restarting when you go into management. I call it the curse of tech, but it's the curse of a lot of gigs where we often promote the best folks into management, and because of what they were great at as an individual. And some of them, luckily, are great at it, and some of them are horrible at it. We end up with a lot of our best folks either burning out of the company because they're bad at management. That would have been great if they just remained as an individual contributor. We can talk about that in the Q&A. The death spiral is not real. It's an unrealistic and deliberate construction. It's unlikely that you'll perform each step of the spiral. It is equally likely, and this is usually when I've read the room, and as I'm telling these stories that are hard to tell, I see people nodding, going like, oh yeah, yeah, I did that. You've probably done some of these things already. So small versions of these things, not all of them. Whether you've performed one or all of these steps, the lessons for me are all the same. And there are lessons I wish they had given to me as a first-time manager. There are many of them, but I want to pick on three because I think they are great anti-death spiral investments. Let other humans around you change your mind. This involves empathy. This involves listening. This involves creating safe spaces where they're willing to tell you. There are more of them than you. Their size of their network is collectively larger than yours. So it stands to reason that they have different opinions, informed opinions, different perspectives. Listen to that information and let others change your perspective and your decisions. I worked at Apple before all this, and I'm back there, but this is a story from before. And we had this meeting with somebody who should be obvious, and we were doing icon, and icons are a really big deal at Apple. They're very, very precious things. And we had and I'm super uncomfortable telling this story now because I work at Apple again. So anyway, there was a grid of icons we were looking at. And when I say like 3x3, when I say they're a big deal, all of these are like page size, hours and hours of work. And there's 9 different ones of these versions of these icons. Done. Like, I don't, like, and remember, most of these are going to be thrown away. So we have this meeting with this person, and he walks in the room, and this is hard to do in video conference, but he walks in the room and he looks up and he's like, these are all crap. I'll do that again because you don't believe me. Walks in the room, looks, these are all crap. And I'm like, what? And I'm not a visual designer or a designer of any sort, but I was like, how did you parse 9 icons in whatever, a tenth of a second? And then we had this conversation about what we wanted out of this and how it was going to go. And we kind of said, we'd like the swirl up here, and we like the blue from that, and we like da-da-da. And so okay, like, we'll come back. We did this meeting with 2 more grids of 9. So do the math there. And in the last meeting, we did the meeting again, and we did it once more. In the last meeting, grid of 9 up on the wall. Person walks in, looks up and goes, number 3, top right, number 3. We're like, oh my gosh. The irony of this is that number 3 on the grid was number 6 from the first set of grid. We just put it in there as a lark to kind of say, what's going on here? That's when you're supposed to laugh. Go, what? It's related to this point because what this person wanted to do, and I wish I heard after the fact that this was their move. What this person wanted to do was wanted to have a discussion, to develop an opinion together, and to allow his opinion about this to be influenced. And if he'd said it like that, it would have been a much different vibe. But that's what you're here as a manager. You're listening to your team. You have opinions, you have values, you have principles, you have things that you care about, but they do too. And your ability to listen to them and for them to see you change your opinion is incredibly important. Augment your obvious and non-obvious weaknesses with a diverse team. It's choosing the path of least resistance to build a team full of humans who agree with you. Ideas don't get better with agreement. Us agreeing isn't actually going to make the idea better. Ideas gather their strength with healthy discord. And that means finding and hiring humans who represent the widest spread of perspective and experience. And you as a leader creating and building a safe place for us to debate and to have conversations. And this is 10 times more important than it was 3 months ago. And it's not about the obvious work we have to do in terms of social justice. I used to say that was table stakes. It's not table stakes. We obviously have a huge amount of work to do there. But we as leaders have a very actionable thing that we can do, which is to build a pipeline, a fair pipeline. And you can look and say, who are the people that are getting an opportunity to go and apply for this position? And you, the leader, not recruiting, doing the work to make sure that all humans are represented there. And then to hire the best one out of that set of folks. They're not even getting there, everybody. They're not even getting into your pipeline because they don't have that opportunity. You need to build that bridge. And finally, delegate more than is comfortable. The complete delegation of work to someone else on the team is a vote of confidence in their ability, which is an essential way that trust builds within a team. Letting go of doing the hands-on work, letting go of your Legos is tricky. And it's a non-obvious, non-linear win, but you build yourself by building other folks. That's what you do. The role, we're working on trust. The role of management is already set up with so much pre-existing guaranteed angst. They know that you're the boss. you gauge their performance, and you set their compensation. It's an intimidating set of responsibilities, and the burden is on you to prove you deserve those responsibilities. And you do that by listening to the team. You build trust by listening to the team, over communicating, delegating just about everything, giving feedback, receiving feedback. It's a long list. There's a couple of books on the topic. But that's what you're working on. This is the thing. This is the currency that you're building inside of a team. And here in our virtual world here, I want you to start small today or tomorrow, whenever you're back to work. Look at each action that you're taking with your team around you, and ask yourself a question. Simple question. No, it's not a simple question. It's a question to ask, though. This thing that I'm doing, this communication that I'm doing, this how I'm saying it, this act that I'm doing inside of a meeting, am I building or eroding trust with this action? If you're generally building trust as you're acting as a leader, you can avoid the new manager death spiral. That's what you're doing as a leader. I'll ad lib here. When I started my most recent job, I had an all hands, and someone asked me, they said, "Hey, Lopp," because they call me Lopp at work because there's too many Michaels on the planet. How do you, and it was one of the engineers somewhere in my org, and he said, "Hey, how do I know you're doing your job? Like, what is like," and it wasn't a snarky question. It sounded snarky because it was an engineer. But he said, "How do I know like you're doing well in your job or doing your job?" And I said, "Great question." And I said, "Here is the thing that I do to build trust on a team. My job, my only job, remember this is Apple computer, well, just Apple now, is the growth of the team. My job for the 9 people, managers and manager types that work for me, is to make sure that I understand what they want to do, how they want to grow, and that we have a plan about how we're going to actually get them there. Some of them want to be directors. Some of them love being a frontline manager and want to get better at skill X, Y, or Z. But that's what I do. And if you can ask them, and this is early on, so ask them in a couple months, do they know that I know and what they want to be, and are we working on it? Now it's interesting, because you'll notice I didn't say anything about the quality of the product or the design of the hardware or the culture of the team. The thing is, when you get the growth of the team right, everything else just comes along for the ride. Everything else just comes along for the ride, because there's this thing going on there, which is you've built trust with the team. You build yourself by building others. So thank you very much. I went a little bit long there. We now have time for Q&A, and also one more teacup pig, which is great. Anyway, I'm going to turn on my screen sharing here, and there's no clapping, which means I bombed, but can't be clapping because we can't do that anymore.
No, yeah, I was laughing a lot. Thank you so much. We do have some questions for you.
Great, excellent.
Perfect. Okay, so the first one from Drew, how can you identify the non-obvious weaknesses? So I think a couple of slides ago you were talking about, new manager.
It's a great question. And I don't usually say more about that, but it's so hard to do when I'm sitting here in my office by myself. There's 2 ways. Thank you, Pamela, for clapping. That's great. There's 2 ways. There's an easy way and there's a hard way. The easy way is you have friends that trust you, maybe at work, maybe outside of work. You need to put on a very serious face and look at them and say, "Hi, Brenda, Joanna, Sam, whoever it is. Tell me what I'm good at and tell me what I'm bad at." Your friends, by the way, they know. They really know. They know, "Hey, Lopp, you are Mr. Vision and Strategy guy. Your tactics are garbage." Because the problem that you have, Lopp, is when you can see the ending of the project, which is not done yet, we're only halfway, but when you can see it, you can imagine it, you lose interest because it's no longer interesting to you. So all those tactics of actually finishing are kind of like, yeah, I get it. So I am bad. I have some work to do tactically. So ask your friends. I usually say, because we're in like a room full of people, I'm like, you're probably sitting near your friend. Ask them, like during a break, what am I bad at? That's the easy way. The harder way is a much, much more interesting. It's called the 360. And I wrote about this in my most recent book that just came out, which I would have copies on hand if we were here, but we'll figure out something. I have a coach, and the way that I got introduced to this coach was a 360. And a 360 is when someone neutral comes into your company and they do an interview with your boss and your peers and all your folks around you. And if you get the right person, he or she, they ask some great questions, and they neutrally and anonymously kind of put together the feedback about how you're doing. Can confirm, I've done this twice now in the last about 5 years. It is the hardest thing you will ever read in your life. And it is the most useful thing that you'll read, because it goes into 2 columns. This is where Lopp is strengths, and this is where Lopp needs to work. And of course, you ignore all the good stuff and you just look at the bad stuff, and always the bad stuff, because people can always say the bad stuff more, is like 3 times longer. And it doesn't read as bad stuff. But when I get this feedback, I look at it for about a year or so. I have both copies of it. It's right over there for both times. And it's the single most synthesized sort of set of feedback I ever got. And by the way, there was nothing on there. There was nothing on that I didn't know. I knew these things. In the back of my head, in the middle of the night, I'm like, oh, bad tactically. But seeing it sort of from everybody, it literally changed my life and my management life. And for the 2 that I had, from the first one to the second was like 3 years later. It was great because on the second one, some of those things were fixed. There was no longer X, Y, and Z there, because I'm like, I am going to get better at this. There are some greatest hits. There's still some work to do. But ask your folks. But a 360 is a really valuable thing. Get a coach in. It's people just pull their punches on feedback, and there's no punches pulled on this one.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Next question from Jose. I really like the notion of building a pipeline of diverse individuals. What gets me sometimes is what happens when you just don't have the ability to hire. Sometimes I think, what's the point of doing this if I can't even get a single rec for my team?
There's 2 different issues there, and let's just split that into 2. Number 2, which is doing the work on diversity in terms of a pipeline. I'm going to twist the question just a little bit. Recruiting is a fine set of human beings, but they are usually just like us, don't have a lot of recs. They don't have a lot of time to do it. My rule for every rec that I have is to spend an hour a day doing something on it, a day. So 5 hours a week. And by the way, that's not an interview. That's getting on LinkedIn and looking at folks that might be interested in doing outreach, or going to my list of people that I know that are not at all looking for the gig and asking, because like 1 out of like 1,000 times they're like, I would really love to work with you again. And you're like, what? This is great. Usually the answer is no. Or usually sometimes it's like, oh, you should really talk with this other person here. So an hour a day for every single rec, which means if I have 3 recs, I'm spending almost half my day doing something related to recruiting and building my pipeline. The can't get a rec thing is it's a different issue. I have so many things to say about this. The thing that I like to be able to do, and this sounds magical and easy when I describe it, and it's actually really hard, is if I've defined the work that I want to do at business so well, or I've delivered the vision so strongly, or it's compelling, or it holds together, or whatever, it's usually the case that people are giving me recs. They're like, that's great. I need a rec. Lopp needs a rec to do this thing. And that sounds like a privileged thing to say. But my point is this. It's very often when people are asking me for recs, they're saying, I don't have time to do it. I don't have time to do it X, Y, and Z. And that's not what I want to hear as a person who sometimes can assign recs. I want to hear, what strategically, what is this narrative here? What is the thing? And sometimes it's data. Sometimes there's data like, hey, by the way, we can only scrub X bugs in a day, or blah, blah, blah. But more often or not, it's poetic and it's strategic about like, hey, by the way, these 3 things the team is doing really, really well. I would love to be able to do X, Y, and Z more if we had a rec. So if there's a pitch to it, that's hard. I get it that it's hard, but that's how I view it.
Thank you.
Yep.
So from Pamela, most qualified is often code for picking the people who have been given opportunities in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
How do you reframe most qualified to ensure that you're truly building a diverse team?
It's a great question, and it's the first thing I did when I got to Apple, because actually I shouldn't talk about that. I also did it at Slack. What does qualified mean? Is the question. You know what it means? A lot of places. It means I know this person and they're familiar to me, which is just chock full of bias. And it's I'm not judging there. It's like nice to know people and know the people that feel like your people. That's not what we're doing at work. We're building a diverse team because our products serve a diverse set of humans. So qualified needs to be actually as objective as you can make it. Even though there are things, there's no way that you can like remove all subjectivity from it. So the way that you do this for whatever your role is you define a set of facets, sort of areas to interview. Well, some examples could be like communication ability, diversity mindset, or growth mindset, or whatever those sets of things are. Then you define N questions, whatever questions that you want to get there. And then the panel, excuse me, the panel who's interviewing folks, they ask exactly the same question. Well, they're trained in asking the questions. We understand what a good answer looks like versus maybe a confusing answer or whatever that is. And we're able to do something that in a YOLO sort of subjective interview loop we can do, which is we compare honestly, objectively, candidate A to candidate B. So we can say, because we have exactly the same questions. And by the way, it's not as fun of an interview because you're not just going to, hey, what's going on today? And you having a good day? No, you can do that piece, but the majority of the interview is this very structured thing, which is designed to remove bias and to get you out of sort of the subjective, like, cool, this person felt like my compadre, to can this person quantifiably do the job. And I say that knowing there's subjective parts. There's sometimes things which are there, but even the subjective parts being the same questions where you can compare column A to column B fairly, I think can help a lot. That's a good answer.
It was, thank you. All right, from James, what things are you doing now to make your pipeline more fair that you weren't doing a couple of weeks ago?
It's not a time to be going to all of your diverse set of friends and asking for candidates. Number one. So I'm giving everyone sort of a break because I'm normally, these are my set of humans here, don't need to be asked a lot of things right now. But what I've done over the last decade or so is have a network of humans around me that they trust me, I trust them, we've worked together. And it's just natural that I know who they're hiring and who I need to hire, and we're always sharing those things. So I have a network around me, and that network is also a +1 network of other folks where they're like, this person is amazing. You should just have coffee with them. They're not even looking right now, but you just need to know this person. That, back to my 1 hour for every rec thing, that is a perfect thing. I have 2 of those this week with just random folks that are friends of friends that I'm going to invest my time in. So it's effectively building a network and having that set of folks. It used to always also be going to events like this and just being open to random new people to meet. Because that's where it happens, right? That's what it is where you see like this person goes like, God, I loved your talk or this sort of thing. And you just end up having a great conversation about diversity or trust or respect or safety or whatever that sort of thing is. So it's could have said this, build a network, but that's the thing is you're always building a network, not just from hiring perspective, but from you as a leader in the world perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see, a couple more. What are the recommended books that you hinted at during your talk?
Oh, they're my books. What are you talking about? Sorry, I didn't shill my books. I feel now, but I'm not going to talk about my books. You can go on the internet and find my books. I want to point out one other book that I think is actually really important. That's not my book. It's called Writing Down the Bones. It's by Natalie Goldberg. And I'm from California, so it's a little hippy dippy, but it's about writing. And I I love writing. Writing makes me smart because it forces me to take this sort of gooiness, weird thing in my head, type it to my fingers, and kind of get it out there. And before there was blogs, there was Natalie Goldberg. I think she's like a Zen Buddhist sort of teacher, and her articles in the side of her book are like a page and a half, and it's just little like writing practices, and it's sort of inspired. I just realized my most recent book, where it was great. I could just kind of sit down. And she's like, "Do this thing in writing," and when I tell you that writing has given me most everything in my life, I am not exaggerating, including my wife, where I'm sitting right now, my jobs, everything has come from writing. And I think that the art of writing is something that every leader should get good at, especially right now when we're sitting here inside of Slack and not there's a lot more communication that's happening that way. So Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg, great book.
Can you speak to holding your team members accountable, especially to those things that you do delegate in a trusting environment, and challenging them respectfully?
Well, it's a really good question. Did the person ask to use the word accountable? They did, didn't they? I think they did.
Yes.
I love that word. So gold star to whoever did. I'm going to give you a book. Accountability. They didn't say responsible. They said accountability. Now, they probably don't truly know the definition of accountability, but accountability is a super interesting word that I love. Accountability, I was asking at my prior gig, I was like, so what does accountability mean to like a room full of executives and responsible people? And someone said, it means if we don't do what you say, something, you're like going to chop my fingers off. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? That's horrible. And there's this threat in times inside of like the word accountability, responsibility. That's not what it means. Accountability is a wonderful world. Like do the root on it. Account, to give account for something, to explain something. So when someone's held accountable, that means they are expected to be able to explain the decisions and the reasons why they did what they did, which is so much more interesting than did you hit your deadline or being responsible for a thing. It's to be truly know what you're doing and be able to sort of like explain to other folks, to be held accountable. Sorry, I love that word. But the answer to the actual question isn't sort of a etymological analysis of the word. It comes back to trust, which is great. I'm going to delegate this thing to you, whatever this thing is. And I'm going to tell you, by the way, this is what the outcome is that I'm looking for. It's X, Y, and Z. And it's not some fuzzy, like it's successful. It's that perhaps that we hit the date, or that it meets this requirement, or there's some survey that we do against it. We get this sort of sentiment from it, but there's something there that I can tell you, this is what I'm holding you accountable for. But it's not the part of that deadline or that OKR. It's that we have had that contract signing maneuver where I said, hey, this is what it means. Very often people like, do this thing. And they're like, cool, yes, boss. And there's a big important thing missing from that, which is why, including how and some other things. So it's that upfront agreement on it. And sometimes maybe you don't know when you delegate, but it's one of those things that I sort of spidey sense sort of guides me towards. Once I'm handing something to someone, I'm like, okay, cool. The thing here in this system of complex people and processes and whatnot is that our bugs are triaged. Okay, that's what I'm going to hold you accountable. How are we going to actually go do it? Not like going through everything. What is the process? How are we going to actually get that done? So thanks for using the word accountability, person.
Thank you, Emma. All right, from John, how do you turn around trust after you've hit the bottom of this, after you've hit the bottom of the spiral?
I've done this talk before, and someone a couple times ago said, have you ever gotten to the bottom and have you ever recovered? Sue. And then I go like hide behind the stage or something like that. Cause it's very, obviously I lived this. It's very hard once you're at that bottom. And if you really do truly do as poorly as I did in these scenarios, how to get out of that. There's something that needs to be literally rebooted, whether that's you changing teams or a different set of projects, but there needs to be some sort of blank slate situation. But that's like step 3. Step 1 and 2 is admitting to those folks, boy, did I mess this up. And this is the consequence of this. And this is what I learned. And this is what I'm going to do differently. That first part, if every leader just knew how to do that part, we'd be in a lot better shape, because very often that pride thing, or that like, I'm the boss thing, um, uh, prevents us from doing that. Be vulnerable. But and again, if it's truly bad, it change of scenery is sometimes the right maneuver. It sounds cowardly, but if you screwed it up that badly, it might be time for a change of scenery. Not my favorite answer. Vulnerability. Amen.
Perfect. Okay, we have time for a couple more, and then reminder
Yeah,
that Mike will be available in the Slack channel for a little bit
absolutely.
after this. Okay, perfect. Good.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, so let's do two more. What are your thoughts on what you mentioned at the start of the talk regarding introverts being the majority of the audience?
I really want to, I want to write this book, by the way, because I asked it on a lark one time years ago. I asked it because I was kind of like, it's a get to know you question for the audience. And I was going through all the roles and responsibilities. I asked this, and then I discovered that every single group I talked to, and it's the introverts, the least likely ones to raise their hands, that are raising their hands. So it's them, right? I think this is my thesis. I think that, and it seems strange and it seems counterintuitive, I think that introverts are better leaders. Sorry, extroverts, y'all are amazing. Like, love ya. You're like, the energy is great there. But I think, and this is bias here, I say it, because of that introversion, that introspection. I think that self-reflection, I think that makes us, sorry, extroverts, you're amazing. I think it makes us better listeners, which makes us better bridge builders, which makes us better connectors. There's a book here. I can totally write this book, to kind of bring people together. But that seems counterintuitive, because leaders are often the ones sitting here on stage doing their thing. But here's the thing for me: I'm an introvert. This speaking thing is really, 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 really hard for me. You probably don't think that, because I'm like, sounds so good. This is years and years of practice and horrible situations that have turned into this. I've gotten better at it because I worked really, really hard on it. And that's the thing, is I think extroverts who are better starting it, but they're also reflecting and can actually figure out how to actually get better. So that's my thesis. I got to write the book. It'll be better once the book is written. But go introverts. Extroverts, you're amazing too.
I'll watch out for that book personally. Cool. All right, from Willie. You talk a lot about how important it is to build trust. In your story about the icons, how did you address the loss of trust from a statement like, these are all crap?
It's a totally fair question. And that's why I put that little caveat at the end is, I like the story. I like telling the story, because it's Apple. It wasn't rebuilt. The lesson was more about how this person wanted to develop an opinion together. And I really wish they had done it in a different way. But that was the thing, is this person, who should be obvious who it is, that's how they chose to do that. And they didn't have an opinion about it. They wanted to work with us to do it. And it's in hindsight that I have found higher trust, but it wasn't a trust-based scenario, unfortunately. Sorry.
All right. Let's do one more. We have a little bit of time.
Okay.
So from Rama, thank you for calling out the phrase, let others change your mind. Simple message yet powerful. Can you share an example or two of some impactful changes that you've implemented based on this? So based on letting others change your mind.
Yeah. One thing was the interview process we talked about a little bit earlier. I liked the organic interview, where I kind of just get to know you. But a really powerful person in my professional career just called me on it years ago. And yeah, it's fun to have an interview and get the people to kind of jam in and kind of organically see where it goes. But this is an important moment for this person. This is their next job. And it's just you in this position of privilege, kind of like YOLOing, kind of like, how does this feel? And that's just, it's a disservice to all sorts of things. So that completely changed the way that I think about interviews, and how, and all of the work that needs to go into it. Because, by the way, if you remember, defining of the facets, agreed upon questions, training people to ask the questions, to know what a good answer is, to know what a high signal versus a low signal. This is all before anyone is even in the building, right? So that was a big deal for me. The other one is around diversity again, and it's really simple thing, but like I said, ideas don't get better with agreement. They get better when we have healthy discord. And by the way, I'm not talking about an easy way to run a team. I'm talking about where people are arguing, perhaps with heated passion behind a thing. I want to work on a team where we can do that. I want not just to have the different perspectives, but where we can really truly argue. And then when we're done, we're like, cool, that was good. I learned something there. And that goes back to the trust thing. If it's a low trust and an argument happens, people get defensive and they have hurt feelings and very real things. And they're like, oh my God, that person doesn't like me. It's like, no. We got to have the discord. We got to have the debate, because that's when we truly find the gems of wisdom, of education, of the facts behind the situation. So, it's one of my favorite people was one of my directors at Slack, and we always arguing, like always. Like you would think we did not like each other, but it would be like argue. And then we're done. I'm like, cool, all right, I'll see you tomorrow. That's great. I learned a lot there, right? And there's nothing personal there. It's just like we have these different perspectives and we want to teach each other because we respect each other. So anyway, those are a couple of things there. There's more. It's a great final question too, by the way.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
Amazing comments. So reminder that Michael will be hanging out in Slack for a little bit after this talk to answer more questions. And so thank you so much. Next up we have Carl Hughes. So we'll get that started shortly. Thanks, Michael.
Bye, everybody.